Hey everybody, thanks for having me. It's such an honor to be able to get to talk to all of you, and I'm really psyched to talk about what we're doing at Centigrade. I also have with me Peter Rossberg, who's the CTO at Centigrade, and he's been an incredible business partner on this project. We both have a long history of working with Ripple and with the XRP ledger. And so this is kind of a continuance on a passion that we've both had, which is around how to leverage the XRP ledger to bring provenance and fidelity to the ecological markets. So uh, I'd like to, Peter, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit, and then I'll kind of talk about this project? You want to talk about Centigrade a little bit, and then I'll start talking about this specific project.
Sure. Hi, I'm Peter Rossberg, CTO of Centigrade, and I was actually a VP of engineering at Ripple for 5.5 years before I joined Centigrade. Centigrade, as you might have got a little precursor for this, but Centigrade is a data platform for ecological projects. So our main focus is helping organizations either document the removal of molecules from the air or the avoidance of molecules going into the air. Since there's no physical product, we do that by storing lots of data to prove that they're following whatever scientific methodology, whether it's a cookstove methodology, a forestry methodology, or a direct air capture methodology that's stored on the Centigrade platform. And then what Clay is going to be showing you is specifically our experimentation with the new MPT token type, because we believe that token type, the multi-purpose token, is ideal for specific requirements for the carbon capture vertical. In fact, I think Ripple's going to be releasing a blog post soon, which gives you a little bit more background on what the major benefits are of using MPTs. So I'll try and get that URL posted for everybody. But I'm going to let Clay now jump into the deep technical stuff and show you how we're using the MPT token specifically for our vertical.
Sure, thanks, Peter. So how basically the foundations of what Centigrade is as terms of a product is we are a platform, a data platform that allows project managers. And when we talk about project managers, we're talking about ecological projects that actually have some sort of impact on the environment around either sequestering CO2 or working with groups that are producing CO2 to reduce that CO2 footprint. But the product itself is meant to bring fidelity to those ecological projects in the terms of collecting information that make people who want to buy these credits believe that these projects have real impact on the environment. So that means that there are two kind of key roles in that, which is the actual project developers, the people who are building these projects out and managing them. And they range in every kind of way from groups that are reserving ecological areas and protecting them to groups that are working with populations of people to reduce CO2. And an example of that would be introducing cookstoves into communities instead of open air fires for cooking, to actual industrial use cases like sequestering CO2 out of manufacturing processes and using telemetry to actually track that. So our system is intended to be a platform where those projects collect all that information, including the hard data around the telemetry, if there's an industrial use case, or the data around how many stoves went into the communities, bringing it all together, and then using the blockchain in order to archive that CO2 in a way that can be monetized. So that's where the buyers come in. The buyers then view all that information and can actually make purchases around their carbon portfolios. Peter, is there anything you want to say around this? You know a lot about this, so I want to give you an opportunity to add to this.
No, I think that's a great description, Clay.
Okay, great. So this is where I'm going to ask Peter to talk a little bit too, because this is coming directly from his set of narratives. So I'm going to quickly kind of summarize it, but I'd like him to dig into it a little bit. So the things we like about MPT is that it's data driven. It also, in terms of a kind of semi fungible pattern for a token, it's far superior to something like an NFT. You can imagine how hard it would be to manage and market 10,000 NFTs on a DEX. It's just not something that is a reasonable kind of pattern if we're talking about trading large numbers of these credits. So that creates it creates a whole bunch of dynamics that we can actually start creating tokens around specific vintages on a project. So we can really boil down a very complex set of parameters around projects to a symbol with a vintage, and that's a kind of powerful concept. It also allows us to manage retirement and burning, which is a key part of the whole life cycle of these tokens in order to claim the ecological benefits. And then there's a whole fidelity and transparency issue. Peter, can you throw some of your language on top of this? I mean, written a whole blog
Yeah.
post around these topics.
Yeah, so basically why not use any other token type, right? I mean, we could just have a regular the original trust line type tokens on XRPL. So why was MPT our preferred way of doing it? For one, MPT is a lot more it supports a more robust amount of data, as Clay said. We are a data-driven platform, so we need to prove that these projects are following different methodologies. So we want to be able to point to data. We want to be able to put some of that data and links to various things on Ledger. And Clay will show you that when we dig into the raw JSON that we store along with the MPT. We also like a lot of the flexibility that the MPT allows us to do. So the ability to claw back tokens, the ability to do an issuance of the token that is soulbound, meaning we have some projects that are selling forward for their project before the carbon credit is actually generated. So I, as an organization, may need financing for my project. Let's say I need to buy the land for the trees, or I may need to pay people to actually do the agroforestry to get my project going. The way I can raise capital for that is to actually sell what's called a forward and say, I'm selling you a promise that this thing will be a carbon credit in 5 years. Now, the problem with selling somebody a forward is you can get into trouble, at least in America, if that forward then gets sold to someone else. It's okay for me to sell a forward once, but if that forward is resold, then it becomes a commodity and gets regulated in America and in other legal jurisdictions. So by being able to restrict with the MPT can transfer flag, we can say, okay, you can only get this, and then once that carbon credit is generated in 5 years, you can return this token and you'll get an actual carbon credit that's fully tradable. Requiring authorization is another thing. For some of these projects, they need to do a KYC, a know your customer, meaning they need to prove that this token and these credits aren't being used for money laundering. That is actually a problem. And so some projects do require to have this KYC done, and it's much better to be able to do this on chain than to try and do this off chain. And that those features, along with the fact that we can attach a lot more data, makes it beneficial. One other thing that I do want to point out, if this wasn't, it's not always obvious for people looking at carbon credits. But as we said, there are many different ways to generate a carbon credit, right? So it could be a direct air capture where you're sucking CO2 out of the air. It could be a cookstove project where you're preventing open fire or bad burning fuel, carbon from going into the air and replacing it with clean fuel. Or it could be planting trees. Each one of those carbon credits has not only this unique set of data that we talked about that's good to store with the MPT, but also the pricing is completely different. So like a forestry credit may go for anywhere from $5 to $35, depending on where the project is and what kind of benefits that project's giving to the community or to biodiversity. A direct air capture project may be anywhere from $250 to $500 again, depending on the technology being used. So this means that we're not just issuing a single carbon credit token. These tokens are also issued based on year. So a token from 2025 might be worth more than a token from, say, 2020 or 2015. So we're issuing. Go ahead. Was there a question?
I think that was just noise, Peter.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah, it's just noise. Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, no worries. So as a result, this isn't like a single token that we issue once and then we're done and then we just increase the supply. We're actually issuing any given project that's on the Centigrade platform probably has a 10-year worth of issuance for a specific project that they're doing, and they may have like 2 or 3 projects. So that means over a 10-year period, you might have a single project issue 10 tokens, and the organization might issue 30 tokens over that 10-year period. So this is another reason why we like the MPTs. They're a lot more flexible, easier to trade, and we're going to be building a lot of them.
And easy to retire too.
Yeah. Also easy to retire. They get sent back to. Well, Clay will walk through the next part, but yeah, they're easy to retire too. Well, Clay, why don't I hand it back to you and you can start digging into the technology.
Well, if you wouldn't mind just talking really quickly about the double counting issue, because I think that's a really kind of thing people don't really know happens a lot and it's an important kind of thing that this fidelity really helps with.
Yeah. So double counting is an ideal reason that we want to use just the blockchain in general, not just MPTs. So if as a project issues these tokens, we want to make sure that these tokens are not issued twice for the same carbon credit, right? So there's a problem in the industry where maybe they'll sell their entire inventory of credits and then sell to another person because, again, there's no physical product, right? There's just a promise that I've taken these molecules out of the air. So there are organizations called registries that manage this double counting today. So I would register my project and the number of carbon credits that I'm going to issue with that registry, a centralized registry, and then that tracks the token issuance. The beauty, as you all know, with blockchain is this is a immutable permanent record where we can just show that data on chain. So as I issue tokens for a project, there is a count of how many tokens are issued for that year and for that project. If those tokens later get retired and the retirement process for carbon credits, the end goal isn't to trade these credits and to make a bunch of money. The end goal is really to say, I'm taking this ton of CO2 that I have bought that was sequestered, and I'm using it to offset a ton of CO2 that created someplace else and I wasn't able to avoid, whether it was an employee like taking an airplane flight or some sort of manufacturing process. So all of this means that there's a lot of accounting and a lot of tracking. By doing this on a public blockchain, it gets rid of the need to have this centralized registry, and we can record all the information for everybody to see, and anybody can audit. If they know your wallet address and they know the project's wallet address, anybody can audit that by themselves without even using software like Centigrade to prove that these things happened.
Could I jump in with a quick question?
Sure.
So how do you manage the complexity of when you are issuing I'm just curious sort of the model that you're seeing. When you issue a token for some carbon that's been sequestered, and then it's sequestered at one point, but then maybe it in the future it's being released in some other form. Like I think of like some forest or some land parcel that's being, has some biomass that's been added to it, but then, the forest is cut down or something. I'm curious what kind of models you're seeing around, mitigating those sorts of concerns since you have a frontline seat.
Yeah, that's a great question. So normally the way this works is a project is promising to have carbon sequestered for a certain amount of time. And in addition to that promise, they will also allocate what's called the buffer, meaning they'll over allocate the amount of carbon that they're actually sequestering. And they'll also record that to say, look, I've got a forest and I'm allocating 20% of the carbon that I'm generating just in case something happens, right? And in addition to that, as a organization purchasing the carbon credits, you can buy insurance that basically will pay you back if there's a forest fire or if some other thing happens. But normally when you're buying that credit, you're assuming that it's going to be sequestered for a certain amount of time. And that's considered good enough for that. And this isn't just on blockchain, this is everywhere. That's considered accepted by the industry that that's good enough. So obviously, a forestry project, you're probably going to get about 100 years of that CO2 sequestered before it could conceivably get released. A DAC project, you're going to get 1,000 years. And so that also is why the pricing is can vary from a forestry to a DAC project or something else. But there's always the risk that through no fault of anybody, the forest burns down or whatever else. And that's why each one of these tokens is an independent token so that you know what the value is of that project, of that CO2 that was sequestered at any given time. So you might have a project that, the forest did burn down. And then that token would be less valuable if you're trying to still trade it or worthless. Great. Any other questions before we move on to the technical piece?
I actually kind of had a question on how do you use clawbacks, or what's specifically a little flavor on clawbacks? We haven't seen clawbacks as a collective, but just if you explain that.
Yes. So clawbacks could be another use case where the project determines that it needs to reduce the amount of token supply. That would be kind of extreme. But we have seen organizations that do that in the real world, not on blockchain, but just say, we're now making you the number of tokens you have less. Another good excuse or another good use case for clawbacks is on issuing these forwards that I told you about. Forwards turn into tokens later, so we want to be able to get those tokens back from whoever they were issued to, so we can reissue them with new tokens. And then finally, you may have a, tokens could be stolen, or tokens could be issued to someone who later turns out to be not a good a player. So maybe they fraudulently passed the know your customer, or maybe there's something else that was concerning going on with that account. So all of those are allowed. Clawbacks are something we're still, we're allowing customers to have that ability for now, but we're going to be really careful as we roll out to the real world if they're actually used. But I think they're a valuable tool to have.
I think the key area that we needed that was around forwards and forward conversion. One thing, and Peter, jump in here, that I think is interesting is the idea of forwards, and that we will issue forward tokens as being different than realized tokens. And to me, that's a really great monetization mechanism for projects funding. Is that a fair kind of what the purpose of forwards are, Peter? Or can you describe what the purpose of for? I mean, the MPTs that we're talking about pre-forward are for realized carbon. Can you explain a little bit about what forwards are for and how they help projects?
Yeah, I think I touched on that a little bit in the beginning. Basically, I have the ability by selling the forwards to to have my projects be funded. A lot of these projects, it's very difficult to get funding. They may have the land, but they might not have the resources to develop the land. You may have a distressed, particularly in the global south, where you've got a distressed piece of property that you want to try and develop back to a good forestry project. It's a lot easier to fund using forwards.
It's kind of like a Kickstarter for eco.
Yeah. So maybe Clay, at this point, it might be good to show the actual flow diagram and some of the other stuff for the project.
Yeah, well, I've got this. I was going to show the product first, just really quickly go into the product and then show the flow. How does that sound, Peter? If I just really quickly, I want to show them the Centigrade platform.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Everybody see this on the? Can everybody see this as shared the platform?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, great. So basically, this is Centigrade, and what it allows you to do is essentially manage a project, and this is how a project is built up, and it has these different tiers of, and every tier is kind of a how powerful or strong your project is as presenting it to the world. And so provenance is a key concept in these projects, that a project exists and it's traceable all the way back to its inception and who started it and where it is. And this idea of provenance is very common in the art world too. It's the idea that we can, in a secure way, talk about the project's origin and who's involved in it. And that's really important for these buyers to understand and have confidence that a project is real and having real ecological impact. And then, as Peter was talking about, there's, how does the project believe it's going to be forecasting how it's going to be making ecological impact? And that has to do with, based on the kind of project it is, and we have these different methodologies. So when you start a project up, you say, hey, am I a manufacturing project? Am I an industrial project? Or I'm a forestry project? Or am I, and each one of those have its own special methodology that the industry recognizes as being authentic and being a real way to account for carbon. And that's why when Peter was talking about the idea of buffers, those are built into those methodologies. And so the whole industry will believe in a project if it's reported on using these methodologies. So then it goes from forecast, and forecast is about those forwards we were talking about. And then it goes into actuals. What, a project is running, it's actually doing on the ground, it's making an ecological impact. How is it doing it? And how do you report on that? And then the key differentiators are, how is this project different than every other? What's going to make this project worth more to a buyer? So this is a very high level, way to talk about. There's a lot of data that goes into these areas, and so this whole platform is meant to be a funnel into growing a project and making it more valuable over time, including supporting documentation and then providing data rooms to actual buyers that they can use to make these decisions. We even provide AI support to actually help people who are both creating the projects and trying to view them, to give them support in getting more quick access to very, very deep amount of data. So our AIs are more around helping people digest this data. And then finally, and this is the part where what I'm talking about comes in, that builds an inventory. And so we have an inventory management system around that carbon that is actually produced. And you can see here that it's segmented into different kinds of areas: what's available, what's reserved, what's sold, and what's retired. And so that's that life cycle that I was talking about. And then below it are the different years, and these are the vintages of what's being produced over those years. So this is about a 10-year project here. And you can see that, over different years, it performed differently in terms of how it actually had ecological impact. So we want to make it really simple for people to be able to then realize that. And so it's just as simple as being able to make a transfer. And so in our system, everyone who participates in our ecosystem has an organization. So we have buyer organizations and we have project organizations, just like those two roles we talked about. So to actually transfer tokens, there would be some sort of prior arrangement between the buyer and the organization. They've talked on the phone. There's been maybe some external audit that's been done. And so now everybody believes and agrees that tokens can be transferred. So that's just as easy as selecting the entity that is going to be transferred to. In this case, the entity they're going to be selling it to, they're going to be transferring to, is Terra Carbon LLC. And then they can just easily choose which vintage they want to transfer. So if we look at 2015, there is no available in 2015. So we're going to have to go to a year that is available. And clearly the buyer also knows they're going to be buying that vintage. And so in this case, we have 1.5 million. And all we really have to do is enter the amount we want to give them. In this case, it's like 3,500. And any notes, this was agreed to as verification 2365, and then we review it. And okay, are we ready? And we transfer. And it really is as simple as that. And under our transactions, we have a list of transactions. Okay, it hasn't recorded on here yet. But these then go to the blockchain, and we can actually view that on the blockchain. So what happens when we do that? Well, I'm going to show you kind of a screen of what's kind of going on here as a flow. Can you see that screen, this screen right here?
Yes.
Okay. So in this case, you can see those two roles that we were talking about, the project manager and the buyer. And each of them have their own account, their own wallet on the XRP ledger. We are a custodial system. In other words, we are actually managing the keys of the organizations, and we have an auditable system. We have been looking at external custody, but in our current implementation, we have a very strong key management infrastructure built on top of AWS key management system that allows us to do custodial on behalf of our organization. So a lot of the machinery of approval that you would see in a common like transfer, we're doing through automation behind the scenes to bring low friction to the customers. So the flow of it is when a project's created, when it's initially started, we create a single NFT, and then we put data around that project and its provenance on IPFS. So that makes it immutable. From that point on, as carbon is realized, MPT token issuance create is created for any specific vintage on a project. So if there's 1 year on a project and we issue tokens 15 times, it's all on one token. And the first time that there's a transfer, that's when the first issuance create occurs. And when that happens, the issuance creates metadata around that token that looks kind of like this. So it's got a ticker. I don't know how. Let's see if I can. Is that a little bit easier for people to see? So this is the metadata right here. So we issue a specific ticker for that token. We say, what is the asset class? And this is all coming from the MPT metadata proposal as part of the MPT improvement proposal. The asset subclass is TCO2. The issuer name is Greta, so that's our organization name. And then what Peter was talking about in terms of being able to show this and surface this to markets is all in this additional info section of the metadata. So if a buyer wanted to buy aggregate tokens across multiple projects, they could search into this additional info. Did somebody ask something?
No, I kept the mic on.
Okay. And then inside of this is the URLs associated with the token. So we have a permalink associated with the token that is going to always be available. So that goes on the blockchain so that anyone who sees it on the blockchain can go to this token and get information. And then we also have a link that's off-chain to the actual project listing itself. These are all published projects. So this is on the internet. So we make sure that we have both a project page and a page that represents the token itself. So I'm going to go back to this flow. So that's at this phase right here, MPT token issuance. And then what you saw me do was transfer. So that would just be a pure payment transaction that goes to the buyer. And then when the buyer can transfer to a third party or retire. And when they do retire, whether it's the buyer that chooses to retire, or whether it's a next in line buyer, they can retire by sending that back to the issuer. And when they do that, it issues a new NFT so that retirement is recorded on the blockchain, and all of the specific universal GUIDs are generated that represent each ton of carbon, and then that's recorded on IPFS as well. So these specific tokens can't ever be double counted. So that's the goal of recording the specific IDs at burn. So that's the blockchain flow and what's going on here. And that's pretty much how we go about issuing carbon on the XRP ledger. Peter, can you think of anything else I should talk to before asking questions, or?
No, I think the only other thing we could do is we could show the view, or I can show the view, or you can show the view just of what it looks like on the live site.
On the lives? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and share.
Show that. Yeah, go share your screen.
View.
I stopped sharing.
Okay. So hopefully people can see that. So this is a example of what it looks like to the general public. So you've got over here your forecast versus actuals estimates. You've got key factors. So, again, the project type, the credit issuer, if it's issued by a registry, will allow you to issue on a centralized registry and tokenize if you want to, different certifications, and then tons of additional data. So that permalink that Clay was talking about that goes to the project page, this is the link that it actually pull up. Another thing that I should probably point out is right now, MPT just was approved. So if you're looking at Clay's code and seeing there's a lot of local hosts and it was all making calls on DevNet, that's why. So we've been doing all this testing on DevNet. We hope in the next couple months as MPT gets live, that we'll be able to move this all over to live. But here's examples of how all that form data that Clay was showing you actually gets visualized. And then we have documentation of social ecological impacts, supporting document display sets. So I think with that, we're open for questions.
So am I correct in understanding that the payment flows are not going through the XRP ledger? Because I see you're transferring the tokens, the MP tokens. I'm just curious, or what are the different models around that?
Yeah, so we, Centigrade as an organization isn't in the flow of funds. So we'll facilitate the moving around of tokens. We're looking to partner with a exchange or other partners. So right now it's a direct over, in the stock world, it'll be an over-the-counter exchange. So these are two parties that have already made an agreement together, and the payment may be through the ledger, it may be through purchase orders. That we leave that up to the companies. We didn't want to be active in the flow of funds.
Maybe actually two questions, not immediately related, but the first one would be, I'm curious, how are you thinking about the business model around this for Centigrade? How long have you been building out the solution? And yeah, sort of a little bit about your journey building this product and getting it to this, very, polished version and almost production ready, I guess, now that MP tokens are loaded in.
Yeah, so we are live. We are not live with the tokenization because we've been waiting for the MPTs. So everything you see, you can go to Centigrade.Earth, and from there's a link to our platform, and we have paying customers. We have around 30 active projects. I think about 10 are published at least. And then we've got a number of others that are haven't been published by the organization yet. I just got back from New York Climate Week, which is the biggest climate week in the world. So that's where a lot of the activity is. So our team has just been signing up new customers, but we have several live and paying customers already. Our business model is we're a SaaS platform, so we're selling per project, per seats. So it's an enterprise B2B sale model. We get money from both the buyers and the sellers. The buyers are paying to access for our tools. We didn't really talk about, because this is about the tokenization, but we've got a number of AI tools that sit on top of these projects. So we have, if you're familiar with MCP servers, we actually have an MCP server that is ingesting and presenting all of the project documents so that it's very easy for your whatever LLM chatbot agent you want to use to communicate with Centigrade, to ask questions about projects. We also have a full data room so that you can present and see documents that are made private by the organization, but available to buyers. So as a buyer, we're really facilitating due diligence and speeding up that process. We're standardizing this data, all the data that you see on our site. We have digitized the methodologies and determined what data we think is important for buyers. Prior to Centigrade, most of that stuff was done by wading through 600 pages of PDF documents. So we've got a pretty compelling value proposition for buyers. On the ecological project side, our proposition is, well, one, it's easier for buyers to find your data and to evaluate you, but also as Clay was alluding to, there's a lot of workflow stuff there. So it'll take you through all the stuff you need to establish provenance. It'll take you through all the stuff that you need to sell forwards. So tier 0 is saying, this is a valid project and this is what it all looks like. Tier 1 is, this is all the data that I need to show that I'm going to generate 100,000 carbon credits in 2028. And then finally, the actuals are saying, this is all the data to prove that those credits are real and I have sequestered carbon. So for a project, it's an easy way for them to manage their information and data and present it to the world.
Are you currently looking for new projects? If so, what type of projects are you targeting? I'm just curious. Can we get clients?
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, we just got back from Climate Week. It was very exhausting. We talked to lots of projects there. So the main methodologies, and it's really about what methodologies have we digitized, right? And which ones do we support? So the main verticals inside carbon sequestration that we're supporting right now are forestry. Obviously, we've got 5 or 6 different forestry methodologies, whether it's AR or Vera. We support cookstove. We have a number of cookstove methodologies that we support. We also support some real cool technology with digital MRV monitoring. So monitoring devices that are actually attached to the cookstove. So one of our projects that just went live for Climate Week, Bridge Carbon. If you go to our website, you can see Bridge Carbon there. They have live data being fed from IoT devices that are sampling whether the cookstove has been turned on or off. Why is that important? Because when a cookstove is being used, that means that the clean cookstove is being used as opposed to a open flame or dirty fuel cookstove. And so we're actually capturing and presenting data showing that cookstoves have turned on or off, so we can prove exactly how much CO2 has been prevented from being released into the air. So we've got a number of cool projects with that. We're also starting to work with some geospatial providers that plug into our service as well. Those are like LiDAR and satellite and drone imagery that are, sampling like forest canopy cover and saying, okay, for this type of tree, you have this type of cover. That means that this much CO2 is being sequestered, again, based on scientific methodology, proving that that's what's happening.
So it sounds like you're integrating different verticals and all the way to the devices sometimes, like understanding how these devices are, what they're measuring and how you can then transform that into carbon credits. Are you are you looking for new partners of that type or new types of technology that might onboard more people? Are you looking at other types of partnerships?
Yeah, so I would say, our main, the main things we're looking at, and what drives all of our other partnerships is we're looking at buyers and sellers, right? We're definitely making a push right now on having more buyers on the platform because that really is what drives traffic, right? A project will list if they know that they can sell their stuff. But in terms of like the digital MRV, measuring, reporting, verification things, IoT devices like I talked about for cookstoves, those we definitely want to have a partner with a project that's going to be on Centigrade, right? So the one thing we don't want to do is integrate a bunch of IoT providers with no guarantee that a project isn't going to be live. So we are careful about that. That's why we're doing the cookstove MRV. We have a live project that's using it. The geospatial, again, we have some forestry projects that are using it. So we want to be careful. We're a small team. So we want to be careful about where we spend our resources, and integrating in with digital, IoT or digital MRV providers is great, but we want to make sure that it's actually impacting projects on our platform.
Yeah, I think it's really sensible to think about, I mean, it sounds like you're positioned in a way where you're bringing people on the platform that, and also their clients, like they're actually bringing their business on the platform. It's easier to use on the platform. Is that how you think about it? Or it sounds like also you want to create opportunities where your potential, carbon sequestering capabilities and offerings are finding clients on your platform. Just curious how you think about that, I guess.
So yeah, I mean, we're careful about who we're onboarding, and just making sure that they fall within the realm of projects that we're working on. We will onboard methodologies that we haven't digitized yet, if it's in our roadmap. So we're letting we've got two main development areas, right? One is the tech, so we got the engineers, but then we also have an equally large team that is basically scientists that are analyzing the methodologies and figuring out how that all that data maps. So for any given methodology, there's probably around 800 discrete fields, whether that field is a data series, a collection of stuff, or is a single data element. All that stuff is defined by our data scientists or our climate scientists. So any given methodology has around 800 discrete data points that we're collecting. Our database of fields is around 5,000 or 6,000 now. So we have 5,000 different fields that the climate scientists can select from to say, okay, this methodology uses this and this and this. And all that stuff gets mapped with our back office tools. So we basically have built out, and again, that's what we're a data platform, right? So there's lots of data management that we're doing. So we have a full back office system that is basically like a no-code platform for our scientists to say, okay, these are the fields that I want to map to this methodology. These fields get mapped to, say, the Microsoft RFP requirements. And so after I as a project, enter in my data, I can actually say, okay, now I want to send this to a Microsoft RFP, or I want to send this to a Google RFP, or whatever the requirements are for those RFPs. So there's a lot of mapping of data that happens in the back office. That was a long way of me saying, so that data mapping also requires a lot of our resources. So we're being careful about like what group of carbon sequestration, what vertical inside carbon sequestration we want to do next. So our main area of focus is forestry. We've got that pretty well covered. Cookstove, getting that, moving that along nicely. Biochar is another one where we started building it out. And then we're doing a little bit of experimentation with direct air capture. So those are the ones that we're mostly focused on. And those are the ones that are getting most of the investment money too. But we, if somebody came to us with a completely different type of carbon sequestration, like some ocean-based thing, we would take a look at it. We just want to make sure that we had, enough interest from buyers to actually put that on our platform.
How do you think about standards in this space? I mean, are there well-established standards? Is it it's kind of like a work in progress? Is that something you can leverage to, build around these standards?
Yes.
I'm
so
thinking
we
also from the point of view of, builders that want to maybe come in and interface with a product like yours. Like, what should they be building towards, in that sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we work with Rocky Mountain Institute to create standards. So there are different types of standards, right? There is these methodologies I talked about. Usually those are developed by a specific registry, right? So Vera has a set of 100 different methodologies that they support. And so we digitize those methodologies. American Carbon Registry has another set. So there's like 5 or 6 big registries out there that have methodologies. So we support those. But on top of that, we started working with the Rocky Mountain Institute in they're a big global think tank based in Colorado. And so we're creating open source standards in conjunction with them that map out like social environmental impacts of carbon, so a lot of these methodologies just focus solely on the carbon, but they don't look at the biodiversity or the social economic impact. So if you go here, I'll share. So we have hopefully I got the right window. Yes. So here's the RMI GitHub repo, and here's a carbon crediting data framework. So you can see I'm one of the main contributors to this data framework, but this is an open source framework that's managed by RMI. And if you go to this, the GitHub repo for RMI CCDF, you can see this framework. And in addition, and then if you drill down into it, you'll see you'll actually see what the Centigrade data structures look like. So inside Centigrade, we actually, that thing that I was talking about that our climate scientists use, all that data is captured here, so you can see like all the fields, like carbon rights. And so this is this repo defines like our entire data schema and data structure for how we're tracking the social economic impacts of these. And this is available. That was a markdown file that's basically a pretty version of this JSON file that you can also see here, where we've got, let's see, provenance, just what Clay was showing you earlier.
Can I jump in just really quickly?
Sure.
So stay where you're at if you don't mind. So how does this, like, there's another standard that Peter is not talking about, but think of it as a Venn diagram, which is the transactional model of the XRP ledger. In 2 key components, there's 2 standards. We all know XRP to be the premier enterprise grade blockchain for where we all believe enterprises are more likely to gravitate to, because it's fast, it's cheap, but we know what's great about it. So when we overlap the standards of the ledger, which are in this case the NFT standard and the MPT standard, with this paradigm, we get a fidelity model, an immutable fidelity model. And so in the case of what he's showing you right now, this data model is what's persisted at provenance with the NFT. So that's by having this data model and having these standards, when we do persist into an immutable blockchain and on IPFS, we have an open source way, an interrogatable way that people can go out and using the blockchain to get information about these projects. So that's the only thing I wanted to add to this, Peter, is that when you add the ledger component, this becomes a very powerful pattern for fidelity.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess my question was around, these standards, you would assume they would come with their own markets, if they're shared standards. So I was curious, I can see the level of depth that you guys go through, and you manage, I guess, many different types of data standards. But very interesting. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah. Like I said, you've got the registries have their standards. Those are following other standards from different carbon organizations, and then there's other frameworks on top of it, like RMI is built. It's like standards all the way down.
At a higher level, maybe, is there, does this, how does this connect to some of the larger carbon markets around the world? Have you thought around, do you have thoughts around, how does this kind of fit into the more broader picture? I'm trying to also give a little bit of lay of the land for builders out here that might be thinking of building in this space. What would be interesting areas to tackle?
Yeah, so we're right now we're just playing 100% in what's called the voluntary carbon market, and that's a little different than the regulated market. So European has its own regulated trading market. The California Air Resource Board has its own regulated trading market. We're staying out of those markets for now, mostly because the voluntary market is where most of the innovation's happening. The voluntary market is also where like the big tech players out here are buying. Google and Microsoft are not being required to buy carbon credits. They're voluntarily buying carbon credits, so they're buying them in this voluntary market. As a result, a lot of that stuff right now is being traded over the counter, right? So this is, again, why we didn't worry about processing the funds per se. The market is, and because the credits are very thinly traded, just as a result of what I described, a project issues unique credits for each vintage and for each project. So each one of those is a very special, unique thing. The liquidity is a whole different thing, right? If we just had one type of carbon credit, like is on the regulated exchanges, that's very different than that 1 ton of CO2 is 1 ton of CO2, and it's worth this much money. But on these voluntary markets, 1 ton of CO2 may be worth $600 or it may be worth $35. And it's all about the narrative and the story of that, what is it saving jaguars and helping indigenous populations? Is it, have the ability to scale up significantly fast after the price comes down? And so that's why we're so data focused. Those voluntary markets really need that narrative, that story, and that data to support their purchasing. But that does mean that they're not quite NFTs, but they're still thinly traded because it's this specific project and that specific project and that specific year. So I think for your cohort, you'd want to think about, do I want to be in the voluntary market or the regulated market? There are benefits of each. My personal belief is the voluntary market is going to be expanding more, and eventually we'll have some sort of regulation on top of the voluntary market. The existing regulated market, to me, is not as interesting. There's not as much innovation happening there.
And for projects out there that want to maybe work on other things than carbon, maybe water or something like that, that might want to come, be users of a platform like yours, do you think this voluntary market is, it sounds like there's a lot of innovation happening in structuring, maybe? Sounds like the buyers you mentioned, the Googles and those big companies, are they coming around to some more structure around? Is that a growing market for?
But interesting things happening with all this AI stuff, right? It's making all of these organizations miss their carbon goals. They're committing to neutrality by 2030, and that was before they realized that they were going to be just burning through energy and burning through resources for this other stuff. So I'd say the market, the total market is growing conceptually. Now there's still some delays, I'd say, in uptake in America right now. Right now is with the current administration, a lot of people are still pursuing these projects, but they're being a lot more quiet about it. It's called green hush. So it's green hush right now in America because of the current administration, or you're trying to buy something that has a good enough narrative outside of the carbon credit that you can justify it. So maybe it's not just buying carbon credits, but you're supporting jaguars in Colombia, or you're supporting, agricultural, regenerative farming in the Midwest, or whatever it is. So
Or
there's a lot more of that.
sustainable energy capture is another one that's
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of, especially on the blockchain. Like when I was at Apex, I saw like 3 or 4 projects that did pure telemetry on sustainable metering. In other words, they were direct to blockchain telemetry recorders of like micro solar or small solar, like not large scale, but like so people could easily meter what they're doing in solar and monetize it. Just interesting stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think
what you guys would be willing to or interested in supporting, like those kinds of use cases.
So right now the biggest market that we've seen is really in the voluntary carbon credit markets. I'd say, at least from our experience, the second biggest market we've seen is in biodiversity. And that's things that we think we could support. Now, there's 2 other big markets out there that we're not touching at all. That in the sustainability, one is these renewable energy credits, like what Clay was talking about, and a lot of those RECs. There are other platforms that are supporting that, where you're basically paying a premium for the electrons so that you know that they're green and sustainable. And there's a lot of blockchain-based tracking solutions for that. I think RMI was actually involved in a few. That's clearly focused at data centers. And then another one that's interesting, again, that's kind of outside of our wheelhouse, is sustainable aviation fuel. But that's another big one where there's lots of credits and registries. I think for Centigrade, we're going to be in carbon credits, biodiversity credits, maybe a little bit of social economic, some of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. But to your point, there are opportunities in renewable energy credits, sustainable aircraft fuel, and some other things that are also very good for blockchain. Plastic credits is another one. I've seen some plastic recycling credits or removal credits.
I'm so sorry because we're a little over time. I'm going to open it up in case there's a question. Want to ask a question? Yeah, you go come here.
Are you planning to have a secondary market? I mean, when Microsoft is buying carbon credit, are they able to make money out of it?
So that's not what we would want to partner with a exchange. So we don't, again, we're not in the flow of funds. We don't want to build a trading platform. We want to be able to issue. Basically, these are real world assets, right? We want to be the issuer for the real world assets. We don't want to be the platform for the real world asset. The other thing that I will point out is that liquidity is a problem for these. So someone else has to figure out how to solve the liquidity problem, because there's a lot of small things that have value, but they're not interchangeable. Right.
Hi, my name is Josh. I'm a resident in the cohort, and I just, you kind of answered the question with the voluntary credits and the flexibility with pricing. That is very predominant in Hawaii, where we have very, very valuable land, and a normal carbon credit wouldn't cover the cost of land to prevent selling or creating a parking lot. What could be done as far as like tax credits or legislation that could help write off the full amount of that premium for the carbon credit?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, outside of the blockchain world, there's open space preserve credits and stuff. It's the same thing for us in the Bay Area. A lot of Sonoma, Napa County is being bought, that farmland or risk of becoming farmland is being bought and kept in open trust reserve. So that's one model to do it. I'm sure they're doing stuff like that in Hawaii. So that's one way to do it. Selling credits to preserve, if that land's truly more valuable and people value being able to preserve that land, again, that's why there's such a variance in voluntary pricing, right? A $5 credit versus a $60 credit, maybe because some organization or some corporation is motivated to preserve that bit of forest, so they're willing to pay $60 because they know that's what it's going to take it off the market.
Hello, I'm Abdullah. So referring to the MCP support that Peter mentioned, sorry if I missed it, but have you built it having a specific use case in mind and trying to solve a specific pain point for your users, or was it more in anticipation in case they might need information on your platform?
I can talk to that, Peter. Yeah, our pattern prior to MPT was trust lines. I mean, we absolutely can't use NFTs. It's just not, the paradigm would not work for, we're talking that millions of credits, right? So it's just impossible to issue millions of NFTs and to track and manage them. So we needed some sort of semi-fungible concept. Before MPTs, the only thing that the XRP ledger had was trust lines.
Clay, I think he's talking about the MCP, the AI stuff, like that connect.
Oh, he's talking about
for any specific purpose.
I thought we were talking about blockchain. Sorry. Yeah, the MCP stuff. I can talk to that too. I built out the adapter. The idea of how we're leveraging AI in a number of areas is to give people the ability to interrogate vast amounts of information quicker. And so AI in general is a way to augment the data platform for both researchers. In the case of an NCCP, you can imagine a tool set that span beyond just Centigrade, that also you can imagine there are MCP tools that are in other kinds of providers. Like, let's say a DEX has their own MCP. And so if you imagine if you had a ecological news MCP, Centigrade's MCP, and a DEX MCP, well, a buyer could go through and do broad valuation for their portfolio against a whole set of projects in order to build out a portfolio in very little time. Something that just wouldn't have been possible prior to an MCP tool. I mean, it would be a lot harder without leveraging something like an AI as well, if you had to use filters and search filters and those kind of things. Peter, do you want to talk a little bit about our MCP strategy as well?
Yeah. So I think phase one, it's all, basically taking search functionality, AI search functionality, so natural language search, RAG tools, and exposing that. So I don't know if you noticed when we were on the Centigrade, there was like Ask Centigrade AI. All of that stuff that you can do, it'll drill down into, usually a project will have like 600 pages worth of PDFs. So it'll search our fields that we've organized, and it will also search those PDFs. And those PDFs are in a RAG server that's helping us retrieve that information out of those PDFs easier. So our first phase for the MCP server is just exposing the tool set to do that searching to the client. So instead of doing those searches on Centigrade, I can use my favorite AI client and just expose that as a tool, so it could do a series of other tasks like Clay said. Phase one. Phase two, we start exposing other capabilities in the Centigrade platform. Those capabilities could be, as Clay mentioned, buying or trading credits on Centigrade. So you could see, like in the case of the DEX, I may go to the DEX and say, hey, I would love to buy some of these credits from this organization. the DEX's agent could go to Centigrade and ask it. Another agent, the organization, the ecological project organization's agent could say, okay, I will release 10,000 credits to this DEX, and then the DEX's client can now put those credits up for sale. The cool thing about MCP is it's like to me at least as a technologist, it's the next evolution of APIs, right? So now I have an API that can tell you these are the tools that I'll expose to you. These are different ways you can log in to get access to other tools. And then that AI client can now query the MCP server to figure out what to do. But yeah, phase one for us is just being able to expose that intelligent searching and to be able to aggregate data and extract data out of those 600 pages of PDFs that the average project has.
So, research is a really big use case especially in our current MCP tool set, and the ability to augment that research with external tool sets as well. And then long-term agentic systems that actually, where you might give an agent specific goals around your portfolio, and it might, over time, execute on behalf of your goals.
And for the geeks in the house, if you're curious what technology we're using, so behind the scenes, we're an AWS stack house, and so we have S3 buckets that are up that our project files are uploaded into using the Centigrade app that you saw. The Centigrade app is written on Python. That stuff all gets uploaded into S3 buckets. Those S3 buckets are actually indexed by Amazon Kendra, which is a RAG tool, an awesome RAG tool. And then we have a lot of the proximity and natural language searching stuff done with vector database embeddings into our regular Postgres database. So we just have embeddings inside a regular Postgres database. We have a separate vector database. And then most of our client work right now, our AI work, we're primarily using OpenAI for now. For the actual summaries.
In conjunction with Pydantic AI, which gives us our agentic capabilities.
Yeah, and then fast MCP server is the MCP server.
Sounds like something a developer wants to, would want to get his hands on to play around with.
Yeah.
Yeah, listen, we're way over time. Lots of interesting questions, lots more questions, so we'll have to do this again. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you getting up so early on the other side of the world. So thank you very much on behalf of everyone here.
Thanks for having us. It was such a pleasure to get to meet everybody here. I hope I get to see you all in person.
See you soon.
All right, we'll see you. Bye.